son of a whore and a Scotsman, dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot.
Hamilton was born on the island of Nevis, which was not a forgotten spot by any stretch of the imagination. Nevis was a major trading port.
Put a pencil to his temple, connected it to his brain, and he wrote his first refrain.
Except it wasn't his first refrain, he was a published poet before that.
When he was 10, his father split.
Ron Schuyler notes that Hamilton, when applying for Princeton College, and indeed King's College later, may have altered his birth year so as to appear younger and thus more appealing as a potential student. Therefore, any mention of Hamilton's age may here be inaccurate. At least we presume, since all we have, and all Alexander had to go on, is the fact that after he left to collect a debt and never returned, he didn't send his mother Rachel any money to support them.
2 years later, see Alex and his mother bedridden.
Rachel Fawcett contracted yellow fever in 1768, 3 years after Hamilton was allegedly 10, at least according to the birth date used by Ron Chernow.
Half dead, sitting in their own sick, the scent thick, and Alex got better.
He didn't really get better. He suffered from kidney ailments as a result of his treatment.
But his mother went quick.
But only if you consider a week to 10 days, according to the World Health Organization, to be a quick death.
Another immigrant coming up from the battle.
There are multiple references made throughout the play to Hamilton being an immigrant. Hamilton was, as before stated, born on the island of Nevis, which at the time was a British colony, thus making him a British citizen. New York, to which he later moved, was also a British colony at the time. Technically then, Hamilton was not an immigrant, because he was only moving from one British colony to another, not from one nation to another. Well, to be fair, he also destroyed a lot of his own rep, as the musical itself goes on to discuss.
America forgot him.
But apparently they remembered him enough to put his face on the $10 bill.
Me, I died for him.
John Laurens didn't strictly speaking die for Hamilton. He died in a different state, still fighting the war he hadn't realised had finished a year ago.
Me, I loved him.
The musical goes to some lengths to establish that Angelica loved Hamilton in a romantic sense. However, beyond playful flirting in letters, there is little to no evidence that this is actually true. It's probably worth remembering for later songs that this song sets the beginning of the musical's events as the year
1776. New York City.
Pardon me, are you Aaron Burr, sir?
This first meeting of Hamilton and Burr is completely fictionalised. It's also unlikely that Hamilton and Burr met in 1776 at all. While they may have passed by each other during their respective studies, it was likely not until the Revolutionary War was underway in earnest that they met.
I have been looking for you.
I'm getting nervous.
Sir, I heard your name at Princeton.
Princeton College was not called Princeton College at that time. It was called the College of New Jersey.
I was seeking an accelerated course of study. When I got sort of out of sorts with a buddy of yours, I may have punched him. It's a blur, sir. He handles the financials.
You punched the Burr, sir?
Lin-Manuel Miranda admits that this anecdote was fudged for the sake of a rhyme. In any case, Hamilton is not thought to have been a particularly violent person, so it's highly unlikely he'd punch anyone, let alone the bursar of the College of New Jersey.
So how'd you do it? How'd you graduate so fast?
It was my parents' dying wish before they passed.
Burr's fast graduation was not on account of it being his parents' dying wish. In fact, he graduated at that speed thanks to his parents' connections to the college.
You're an orphan. Of course. I'm an orphan. God, I wish there was a war.
Except there kind of already was a war. The Revolutionary War began in 1775, and if you recall, this song is set in 1776.
Yeah, I'm John Laurens in the place to be.
This mass meeting of all four of these characters is wildly inaccurate. Hamilton befriended Mulligan first while applying for the College of New Jersey in 1773. He met John Laurens in 1777 whilst serving on Washington's staff. The Marquis de Lafayette wasn't even in America in 1776. He left France in April 1777.
He has 2 pints of Sam Adams, but I'm working on 3.
Sam Adams branded beer was introduced over 200 years after this play's events. While Sam Adams the man did inherit his father's brewery, it is very unlikely that the beer would have been referred to solely as Sam Adams beer back in 1776.
Yes, I heard your mother say, come again. Like up your daughters and horses. Of course, it's hard for having to course over 4 sets of corsets.
Lynn admits on Genius that Mulligan being a bit of a horn dog was more for the funny and isn't really accurate.
I'm
I get a scholarship to King's College.
But he was already a King's College student by 1776.
Only 19, but my mind is older.
Business Insider claims Hamilton was about 20 or 21 in 1776. Though as previously mentioned, Hamilton did lie about his age in the past, and the source they cited claims his age is imprecise. So I'll leave this one open for debate.
Britain keeps shitting on us endlessly. Essentially, they tax us relentlessly.
This wasn't the main grievance of the Americans during that period. It was more to do with having their taxes decided for them whilst not having a voice in Parliament. American taxes at the time were actually lower than those in Britain.
I dream of life without a monarchy.
It would be quite a stretch to imply that the Marquis de Lafayette was anti-monarchist in any way. He supported King Louis XVI and the idea of a constitutional monarchy, and he actually helped the king during the storming of the Bastille.
Yo, I'm a tailor's apprentice.
No, he wasn't. He was actually a full-fledged tailor at the time.
Geniuses, lower your voices. You keep out of trouble and you double your choices. I'm with you, but the situation is fraught. You've got to be carefully taught. If you talk, you're gonna get shot.
This implication that Burr is kind of cautiously supportive of the revolution at this point is rather inaccurate. In actual fact, Aaron Burr fought in the revolution under his own steam in 1775.
What are the odds the gods would put us all in one spot?
I somehow doubt that Hamilton would refer to the gods like that, since he was a Christian.
Pop in a squad and conventional wisdom, like it or not. A bunch of revolutionary manumission abolitionists.
What the heck even is this line? Manumission is the formal procedure by which a slave is freed, so a manumission abolitionist would be somebody who wants to abolish manumission? That seems kind of counterintuitive.
I never had a group of friends before.
Maybe so, but these were not his first friends. He had made a friend in childhood by the name of Edward Stevens, the son of a merchant who had taken him in after his first cousin's suicide.
I promise that I'll make y'all proud.
Let's get this guy in front of a crowd.
Except Hamilton had already been in front of a crowd at least once by that point. The story of tonight gets a pass because I couldn't find any glaring inaccuracies in that one.
Take Philip Schuyler, the man is loaded. Uh-oh, but little does he know that his daughter's Peggy, Angelica, Eliza, sneak into the city just to watch other guys.
According to one blogger, there doesn't seem to be much evidence of the Schuyler sisters gallivanting through New York, so I'll tentatively call this one an unproven claim or possible invention rather than a flat-out inaccuracy.
Angelica, Eliza.
Throughout the musical, Elizabeth Schuyler is referred to as Eliza colloquially. It's more likely she would have been more often referred to as Betsy by family and friends, if letters are anything to go by.
Daddy said to be home by sundown.
Daddy doesn't need to know.
Daddy said not to go downtown.
This depiction of Peggy as the reserved sister is probably quite a stretch. Far from the reserved depiction here, her contemporaries described her as having a wicked wit and being endowed with a rare accuracy of judgment in men and things.
Excuse me, miss, I know it's not funny, but your perfume smells like your daddy's got money. While you slumming in the city in your fancy heels, you searching for an urchin who can give you ideals.
Burr, you disgust me.
Ah, so you disgust me. I'm a trust fund, baby, you can trust me.
This song, and A Winter's Ball after it, imply that Aaron Burr was a bit of a womanizer. Not all historical accounts concur with this. Nancy Eisenberg, for instance, claims that such an image of Burr was basically conjured up by his political adversaries and not entirely true.
I've been reading Common Sense by Thomas Paine.
Common Sense was published anonymously, and contemporary praise for the book professed not to know who had written it, so it's likely that she wouldn't have known who the author was either.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
And when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I will compel him to include women in the sequel.
A statement such as this would likely have been downright radical in the late 18th century. At that point, feminism was a fledgling movement, and it wouldn't be until 1792, over a decade after this song takes place, that Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Women, often seen as the first feminist manifesto, would be published.
Hear ye, hear ye! My name is Samuel Seabury, and I present free thoughts on the proceedings of the Continental Congress.
There are 4 things wrong with Farmer Refuted. First of all, this entire exchange happened between 1774 and 1775, 1 to 2 years before the musical's established start date of 1776. Secondly, Samuel Seabury did not present his free thoughts on the proceedings of the Continental Congress in public. He published them as a pamphlet in 1774. Not to mention, he also didn't publish them under his own name. He published them under the pseudonym A.W. Farmer, hence the name Farmer Refuted.
Yeah, he have you all unravel at the sound of screams. But the revolution is coming, the have-nots are gonna win this. It's hard to listen to you with a straight face.
Hamilton also did not respond publicly. He first published a full vindication of measures of Congress in 1774, then the farmer refuted in 1775.
Again, there isn't really much to criticise about You'll Be Back, so I'll just move on to Right Hand Man.
British Admiral has got troops aboard.
There's quite a large actual time jump between the events of You'll Be Back and Right Hand Man, as the events of Right Hand Man actually do take place in 1776.
32,000 troops in New York Harbor.
The actual number of troops that the British landed seems to vary depending on who you ask. Battlefields.org claims 20,000, Britannica claims 30,000, and MountVernon.org
Claims the musical's 32,000.
Now I'm the model of a modern major general.
The Bards of Penzance reference, while tactful, actually understates George Washington's rank. Washington was a general, which is 2 ranks above a major general.
Let's take a stand with the stamina God has granted us. Hamilton won't abandon ship. Yo, let's steal the cannons.
The musical simplifies the historical chronology here. Hamilton and Mulligan stole the British cannons in August 1775, not during the Battle of Brooklyn in 1776. Hamilton and his artillery company saw battle at the tail end of the British conquest of New York City, in the Battle of White Plains.
Your Excellency, you wanted to see me?
Hamilton, come in. Have you met Burr?
Yes, sir. We keep meeting.
This exchange between Burr and Hamilton may very well not have happened either. Several sources quote Hamilton as joining George Washington as an aide-de-camp in 1777.
At that point, Burr had already served a 10-day stint as Washington's aide-de-camp in 1776.
I look forward to seeing your strategy play out.
Burr, sir, close the door on your way out.
George Washington didn't immediately dismiss Burr like that.
As before stated, Burr did actually serve a 10-day stint as Washington's aide-de-camp in 1776.
Son, we are outgunned, outmatched.
I need all the help you can get. I have some friends, Lawrence, Mulligan, Marquis de Lafayette.
Hamilton couldn't have volunteered John Lawrence and Marquis de Lafayette because he didn't know them at the time.
The only exception to this would be Mulligan, who Hamilton may well have recommended, leading to Mulligan becoming an intelligence officer for Washington.
Martha Washington named her feral tomcat after him.
That's true.
The feral tomcat anecdote is more than likely not true, and Miranda begrudgingly admitted so in a tweet from 2015.
1780, a winter's ball, and the Schuyler sisters are the envy of all. Yo, if you could marry a sister, your rich son.
Is it a question of if, Burr, or which one?
Except by that point he kind of already had his eyes firmly fixed on Elizabeth Schuyler. In fact, he had already met Elizabeth in 1777 and was a regular visitor to her aunt's home where she was staying.
I have never been the type to try and grab the spotlight.
This is a pretty contentious line. According to Ron Chernow, Elizabeth Schuyler's contemporaries described her as, for instance, being energetic and having a strong character, and another source described her as being a lively person.
We were at a revel with some rebels on a hot night.
This may be me being slightly too nitpicky, but if it was a hot night, why is it described earlier as a winter's ball? If it was winter, it would be a pretty cold night, wouldn't it?
Elizabeth Schuyler, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Schuyler,
My sister.
Thank you for all your service.
if it takes fighting a war for us to meet, it will have been worth it.
This scene seems to imply, again, that this was Hamilton and Elizabeth's first meeting, which, as we have already established, it was not. They had already met, again, in 1777.
Laughing at my sister, cause she wants to form a harem.
I'm just saying, if you really love me, you would share 'em.
Ha!
This is a quote from Angelica Schuyler, but it comes from a later letter from 1794, not 1780.
2 weeks later in the living room stressing, my father stone-faced while you're asking for his blessing. I'm dying inside as you whine and dine.
Hamilton didn't wine and dine with Philip Schuyler as his proposal or ask for his blessing directly. More to the point, Philip also did not give it directly. He accepted the proposal in a letter after discussing it with his wife.
My father makes his way across the room to you. I panic for a second thinking we're through, but then he shakes your hand and says, be true.
That doesn't really convey Philip's mood about the whole affair. Chernow claims the letter he wrote Hamilton was businesslike.
Alright, that's what I'm talking about! Now everyone give it up for the maid of honor, Angelica Schuyler!
Angelica was already married by this point, so she would not, and indeed could not, be a maid of honor. Neither would the love triangle that the musical implies existed have been a thing. While Alexander and Angelica were very close, often to the point that they were mistaken for lovers, they were still just friends.
My name is Angelica Schuyler.
I suspect that Alexander would have known that already. I don't have exact dates because trying to find them was an absolutely infuriating task, but between the Winter's Ball and his marriage to Elizabeth, Chernow claims Hamilton had already gotten to know the entire Schuyler family.
I'm a girl in a world in which my only job is to marry rich. My father has no sons.
Yes, he did. Lynn actually admits this one too, so no, it would not have fallen onto her shoulders to marry rich either.
Cause if the tomcat can get married,
If Alexander can get married,
there's hope for our ass after all.
Again, the musical is fudging the order of events here. Hamilton was actually the last of his friends to be married. Mulligan, the Marquis de Lafayette, and John Laurens were all already married by this point.
Ignore them. Congrats to you, Lieutenant Colonel.
Except this actually happened long before Hamilton's wedding. I also couldn't find any inaccuracies in Wait for It, and that's largely a monologue by Burr anyway, so let's move on to Stay Alive.
There's only one way for us to win this. Provoke outrage. Outright.
That's right.
Don't engage, strike by night. Remain relentless till their troops take flight.
Make it impossible to justify the cost of the fight.
The American army had already been using tactics like this, called partisan warfare and later referred to as guerrilla warfare, for 5 years already.
I go back to New York in my apprenticeship.
He didn't go back to New York, he had been there the whole time. Also, as before mentioned, he had long been a full-fledged tailor by this time.
I ask for French aid. I pray that France has sent a ship.
Again, that might have happened long before the events of this song, and even before the events of Helpless.
1,000 soldiers die in 100-degree heat.
Actually, this is an exaggeration. 1,000-odd soldiers either died or were wounded, says Chernow.
Instead of me, he promotes Charles Lee, makes him second in command.
Charles Lee was already second in command since 1775.
I'm a general.
Yeah, he's not the choice I would have gone with. He shits the bed at the Battle of Monmouth.
That's a bit of an oversimplification. Lee was not stupid by any stretch. He actually had quite a reputation owing to his actions in the war, not least his defense of Charleston in 1776. He had also been second in command to Washington since 1775, and was reinstated in 1778 after returning from capture by the British.
Charles Lee was left behind without a pot to piss in.
This is a bit of a distortion. Rather than being left behind, he was court-martialed and suspended from the Continental Army for a year.
He started saying this to anybody who would listen.
Washington cannot be left alone to his devices. Indecisive from crisis to crisis. The best thing he could do for the revolution is turn and go back to planting tobacco in Mount Vernon.
This bit was actually done in a pair of open letters entitled A Vindication to the Public and Some Queries Political and Military, neither of which actually mentioned Washington by name.
And as we all know, John Laurens responded to these with...
Strong words from Lee. Someone ought to hold him to it.
I can't disobey direct orders.
Then I'll do it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's the 10 dual commandments.
This is a pretty well executed Biggie Smalls reference, but probably not an accurate representation of the actual dueling code used around that time. There are various examples throughout history of dual commandments, some of which, for instance the Irish Code Duello, ostensibly drawn up in 1777, are likely to be fabrications. The closest set to the slimmed-down rules here used is, according to Diane L. Durante, the Code of Honour, or Rules for the Government of Principals and Seconds in Dueling, by one John Lyde Wilson, which was first published in 1858, long after this particular duel.
Duel before the sun is in the sky.
Pick a place to die where it's high and dry.
Except this particular rule couldn't have possibly been followed in this particular duel, even if it was part of their real dueling code. This duel took place at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Send in your second, see if they can set the record straight.
Alexander.
Aaron Burr, sir.
Aaron Burr was not Charles Lee's second. That was one Major Evan Edwards.
Lee, do you yield? You shot him in the side. Yes, he yields.
Charles Lee did not yield upon being shot. According to the record of the event, both Lee and Laurens wanted to fire again. Hamilton and Edwards were the ones to eventually talk them out of it.
Lee, you will never agree with me, but believe me, these young men don't speak for me. Thank you for your service.
Let's ride.
Hamilton,
Sir.
meet me inside.
Here, the musical knits together events that are 3 years apart. The Lee-Lawrence duel happened in 1778, and the exchange leading to Hamilton leaving Washington's command occurred in 1781.
You gave me command of a battalion, a group of men to lead. I could fly above my station after the war.
Or you could die, and we need you alive.
I am more than willing to die.
Your wife needs you alive, son. I need you alive.
Call me son one more time!
Go home, Alexander. That's an order from your commander. Go home.
The song implies that the Lee-Lawrence duel constituted the reason why Washington sacked Hamilton. In actual fact, it was a lot more drawn out than that. Tensions had been mounting between the two for a while, and eventually they parted after Hamilton elected to wait for him in the wrong place. This is itself another inaccuracy in the play. Washington and Hamilton did not meet in Washington's office, though Hamilton thought he was supposed to. In fact, Washington had been waiting on the stairs for 10 minutes according to him, but Hamilton himself disputed that. After this incident, Washington actually sent Lieutenant Colonel Trench Tillman to try and get him back, but Hamilton refused.
How long have you known me?
A month or so.
Eliza, you should have told me.
I wrote to the general a month ago.
Given the typical gestation period of human beings, Philip may have been conceived after Hamilton resigned from his post. He was born in January of 1782, which means that he was probably conceived sometime in April of 1781, and Hamilton wrote to Philip Schuyler to inform him of his resignation from Washington's command in February of that year.
How does a ragtag volunteer army in need of a shower?
While technically the first shower was patented in England around 13 to 14 years before the events of this song, it didn't reach its current popularity in America until about the 1980s.
Somehow defeat a global superpower. How do we emerge victorious from the quagmire, leave the battlefield waving Betsy Ross's flag higher?
The legend that Betsy Ross sewed the first American flag is almost certainly a total fabrication. It didn't even first appear until 1870, over 3 decades after Betsy Ross's death, and was spurious even then.
Yo, turns out we have a secret weapon, an immigrant you know and love who's unafraid to step in. He's constantly confusing, confounding the British henchmen. Everyone give it up for America's favorite fighting Frenchman!
Much like Hamilton, Lafayette wasn't technically an immigrant because he didn't migrate to America. He returned to France to provide supplies for the Americans, and then returned to France again after the war was over. This actually happened in 1779, a couple of years before the events of this song, and what he was actually going to get is explained in the very next line.
Come back with more guns on ships.
For this to succeed, there is someone else we need.
I know.
Lafayette did not recommend Hamilton to Washington for the charge at Yorktown. He actually recommended Lieutenant Colonel Jean-Joseph Sourbadet de Gimin for that position. Washington himself then overruled Lafayette and appointed Hamilton himself. I could not find any inaccuracies in History Has Its Eyes on You either.
With my friends all scattered to the winds, Lawrence is in South Carolina.
No, he isn't. He was right there at Yorktown alongside Hamilton. Lynn actually admitted that he fudged this one on purpose to make the story flow better.
And as our fallen foes retreat, I hear the drinking song they're singing.
The soldier singing "The World Turned Upside Down" is apocryphal. There's no actual sources to say that they did.
Insane! You cheat with the French, now I'm fighting with France and with Spain. I'm so blue. I thought that we made an arrangement when you went away. You were mine to subdue.
Very much contrary to his attitude in What Comes Next, King George III may actually have been cautiously optimistic about the future of the relationship between America and the British Empire, and he was even open to a new relationship with America. He wrote in an essay thought to be written sometime in the 1780s, "It is to be hoped we shall reap more advantages from their trade as friends than ever we could derive from them as colonies, for there is reason to suppose we actually gained more by them while in actual rebellion, and the common open connection cut off, than when they were in obedience to the crown." I also couldn't find any inaccuracies in Dear Theodosia, so let's move on.
Alexander, there's a letter for you.
It's from John Lawrence, I'll read it later.
But I will gladly join the fight.
No, it's from his father. On Tuesday, the 27th, my son was killed in a gunfight against British troops retreating from South Carolina.
I think this is probably some kind of guesswork on Lin's part. We don't actually know how Hamilton learned of the death of John Lawrence, and of 3 known letters sent to Hamilton by John's father Henry, 2, one of which is lost, were sent in 1779, 3 years before his death, and the last 3 years after that in 1785.
Even though we started at the very same time.
This is probably the most nitpicky accuracy I'm going to point out in this entire video. They did not start at the very same time, they merely started in close temporal proximity to one another.
I intend to prove beyond the shadow of a doubt with my assistant counsel.
Co-counsel Hamilton, sit down. A client Levy Weeks is innocent.
The Levi Weeks trial occurred over 1799 and 1800, long after the events this song covers.
Burr, you're a better lawyer than me.
Okay.
I know I talk too much, I'm abrasive, you're incredible in court. You're succinct, persuasive. My client needs a strong defense. You're the solution.
Who's your client?
The new U.S. Constitution.
While Hamilton may well have held Burr's skill as a lawyer in high esteem as he does here, this exchange where Hamilton asks Burr in the middle of the night to help him pen the Federalist is entirely made up. There isn't even any evidence that Hamilton even asked Burr to help him author the papers at all. The people he did ask were James Madison, John Jay, William Dewar, and Gouverneur Morris, the latter of whom declined.
What?
We won the war. What was it all for? Do you support this Constitution?
Of course.
No, he didn't. Chernow describes Aaron Burr as an anti-federalist who would not have supported the new Constitution.
I am sailing off to London. I am accompanied by someone who always pays. I have found a wealthy husband.
She found him in 1777, long before this.
Alexander joins forces with James Madison and John Jay to write a series of essays defending the new United States Constitution entitled The Federalist Papers. John Jay got sick after writing 5. James Madison wrote 29. Hamilton wrote the other 51!
And also collaborated with Madison on 3 of his. Whilst the intermission's happening, I'll talk about my sponsor a little bit. Hamilton may be pretty inaccurate so far, but your aim when you're playing games should not be. So this video is sponsored by C2 Gripz. C2 Gripz sells ergonomic pistol grips for controllers, the first such product of its kind in the world. Using one of these grips can help improve your KD ratio and time on target, and can even help you keep playing for longer. Plus, it's specially designed to help with injuries and disabilities affecting the hands, such as arthritis and tendinitis. Shipping is free for United States customers, and in the future, the company is also hoping to cut shipping costs for international customers as well. Finally, if you use the promo link on screen right now, you can support my channel directly if you purchase any C2 Gripz product. Ad over, back to the video.
1789. Virginia, my home, sweet home, I wanna give you a kiss. I've been in Paris meeting lots of different ladies. I guess I basically missed the late 80s.
The song seems to imply that Jefferson had been absent for pretty much the entirety of the events of the Revolutionary War. In fact, he left after the end of the war in 1784. So to be fair, he had missed a bit, but not as much as this song implies.
Hamilton's new financial plan is nothing less than government control. I've been fighting for the South alone.
It would be pretty difficult to say that of James Madison, given that he and Hamilton had not long prior collaborated on the Federalist.
Mr. Jefferson, welcome home.
Mr. Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton.
Hamilton and Jefferson had actually met once before, some years prior in 1783, while they were serving on the Continental Congress.
Ladies and gentlemen, you could have been anywhere in the world tonight, but you're here with us in New York City. Are you ready for a cabinet meeting?
The earliest evidence of there having been a cabinet meeting under George Washington is from 1791. That's a year or two after the events of this song.
The issue on the table, Secretary Hamilton's plan to assume state debt and establish a national bank.
The events of this song are stated to take place in
1789.
But Hamilton didn't propose the establishment of the Bank of the United States until 1790. Also, much like Farmer refuted, the discussions depicted here would have actually been done in writing rather than in person.
Secretary Jefferson, you have the floor, sir.
It was actually James Madison who spearheaded a lot of the debate on the assumption of state debt, not Jefferson. Jefferson didn't even assume office until early in 1790.
Ow, but Hamilton forgets. His plan would have the government assume states' debts. Now place your bets as to who that benefits. The very seat of government where Hamilton sits.
Not true.
Look, When Britain taxed our tea, we got frisky. Imagine what gon' happen when you try to tax our whiskey.
The creation of a national bank, the assumption of state debts, and the whiskey tax were discussed in real life in 3 separate debates. This song seems to condense all 3 of those debates into one big debate, which is weird because 2 of these debates didn't really begin to heat up until after the Compromise of 1790, which the musical places later on in the chronology.
I practice French and play piano with my mother. I have a sister, but I want a little brother.
By age 9, Philip Hamilton already had a little brother. 2, in fact. One named after his father, and another named James.
My daddy's trying to start America's bank.
The only evidence we actually have of Philip Hamilton's writing is a single letter from about 1797, so him being a poet like this at age 9 is likely some kind of conjecture.
Eliza, I've got so much on my plate.
We can all go stay with my father.
It was not Elizabeth Schuyler who suggested the Hamiltons come to Albany in mid-1791. Philip Schuyler Sr. invited them.
My dearest Alexander, you must get through to Jefferson. Sit down with them and compromise. Don't stop till you agree.
The events of this song took place after the Compromise of 1790, so why is Angelica saying this whole bit about getting through to Jefferson now?
In a letter I received from you 2 weeks ago, I noticed a comma in the middle of a phrase. It changed the meaning. Did you intend this? One stroke and you've consumed my waking days. It says, my dearest Angelica, with the comma after dearest.
This whole comma thing actually happened in reverse. Angelica misplaced a comma in a letter to Hamilton, which Hamilton teased her about in his subsequent missive.
I'm coming home this summer at my sister's invitation. I'll be there with your family if you make your way upstate. Alexander, come downstairs. Angelica's arriving today.
Angelica's visit to America in this song seems to be made up. A letter from Hamilton dated November 1791 suggests that she was in Europe at the time this song took place.
That's when Miss Mariah Reynolds walked into my life. She said,
I know you are a man of honor.
Typically in the musical, Mariah Reynolds is portrayed by the same actress as Peggy, who is typically an actress with black or brown hair. The problem with this being that Mariah Reynolds was very much blonde.
a month into this endeavor, I received a letter from a Mr. James Reynolds, even better.
The first letter from James Reynolds actually came on the 15th of December, which is considerably more than a month after Hamilton began his affair with Mariah Reynolds.
Uh-oh, you made the wrong sucker a cuckold, so time to pay the piper for the pants you unbuckled. And hey, you can keep seeing my whole wife if the price is right.
James Reynolds' attitude towards his wife was not quite that dismissive in the real letter. Reynolds showed that he was quite upset about his wife's infidelity.
If not, I'm telling your wife.
He also didn't threaten blackmail until much later.
I hid the letter and I raced to a place, screamed, I'll cut you in the face.
The letter would not have really come as a surprise in this manner. Mariah had actually written to him first to warn him of it.
Ah, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Burr, sir.
Hey, did you hear the news about good old General Mercer?
No.
You know Claremont Street?
Yeah.
They renamed it after him. The Mercer legacy is secure.
I couldn't actually find any primary sources for this inaccuracy, so this is only a tentative one. A number of secondary sources claim that Claremont Street was renamed Mercer Street in 1799, about 9 years after the actual events this song covers and 8 years after this song takes place in the musical.
Two Virginians and an immigrant walk into a room diametrically opposed foes. They emerge with a compromise, having opened doors that were previously closed.
As previously stated, the events of this song take place in 1790, hence why it's called the Compromise of 1790, meaning it's out of place in the chronology.
Look! Grandpa's in the paper! War hero Philip Schuyler loses Senate seat to young upstart Aaron Burr.
I'm relatively certain that this song is just sort of bringing up a few events that happened around this time rather than portraying any actual gathering of the family.
Burr, since when are you a Democratic Republican?
The Democratic Republicans weren't officially called that until 1798. Before then, they were just the Republicans.
Remember, my decision on this matter is not subject to congressional approval.
Yes, it is. Article 1, Section 8 of the US Constitution straight up says that Congress has the right to declare war and raise armies.
Only a promise that we'd lend a hand and stand with them if they fought against oppressors, and revolution is messy, but now is the time to stand. Stand with our brothers as they fight against tyranny.
According to Jefferson himself, he was not only not the first to speak on the matter, but that he knew from the outset what the outcome would be simply from the wording of the invitation to the meeting. So it's probably not all too likely that he was as explosive as he is in this song.
Oh, this immigrant isn't somebody we chose. Oh, this immigrant's keeping us all on our toes. Oh, but show these federalists who they're up against. Oh, Southern motherfucking Democratic Republicans!
Again, the Democratic Republicans weren't called that yet. They were still just the Republicans at this point.
I want to give you a word of warning.
Sir, I don't know what you heard, but whatever it is, Jefferson started it.
Thomas Jefferson resigned this morning. I'm stepping down, I'm not running for president.
Jefferson's resignation and Washington's drafting of a farewell address were 3 years apart from one another. So was Jefferson's stepping down and his run for presidency. Hamilton himself actually clocked that Jefferson was after the presidential chair. Jefferson claimed publicly, and Washington thus believed, that he was simply retiring from public life. Also, Hamilton did not find this out from Washington personally. Once again, he found out through a letter.
They say George Washington's yielding his power and stepping away. Is that true? I wasn't aware that was something a person could do.
Except he absolutely would have known. In fact, after losing the war, he nearly did it himself. Allegedly, King George spent more headspace dealing with the Prince of Wales' unhappy marriage around that time than with George Washington's successor.
How does Hamilton, the short-tempered protean creator of the Coast Guard?
What Hamilton founded was not the Coast Guard, but the Revenue Marine, which later became the Revenue Cutter Service. The Coast Guard wasn't formed until 1915, when the Revenue Cutter Service was merged with the Life Saving Service.
Jefferson's the runner-up, which makes him the vice president.
Washington can't help you now, no more Mr. Nice President.
Adams fires Hamilton.
He couldn't have fired Hamilton because Hamilton had resigned already in 1795.
We have the check stubs from separate accounts.
Almost $1,000 paid in different amounts.
To Mr. James Reynolds.
Hamilton actually ended up paying Reynolds more than $1,000. $1,000 was the initial payment Hamilton made, followed by several $30 to $40 installments thereafter.
Way back in 1791.
Is that what you have? Are you done?
You are uniquely situated by virtue of your position.
Though virtue is not a word I'd apply to this situation.
To seek financial gain, to stray from your sacred mission.
And the evidence suggests you engaged in speculation.
An immigrant embezzling our government funds.
The events portrayed in this song actually took place over the course of several meetings. It was one Frederick Muhlenberg, along with James Monroe, and one Abraham Venable, who first confronted Hamilton about his supposed illegal speculation back in November of 1792. Not Madison, Jefferson, or Burr. James Monroe then sent copies to Jefferson, and the House of Representatives clerk kept a copy as well. After that, it was a journalist named James Callender who reopened the accusations in 1797, for which Hamilton cast the blame on James Monroe. It was this that prompted him to publish the Reynolds pamphlet.
I was 12 when my mother died.
Except, as before stated, he was probably 13 when his mother died, not 12.
The Reynolds pamphlet.
I came as soon as I heard.
This is both an inaccuracy and an understatement. Inaccurate because her coming to America may not necessarily have been in response to the publishing of the Reynolds pamphlet, and an understatement because it was actually her entire family moving to America from London.
I'm erasing myself from the narrative. Let future historians wonder how Eliza reacted when you broke her heart.
This entire song is largely based on inference than on actual historical events. It's not actually known why Elizabeth burned all her letters to Alexander, so her actual reaction to the Reynolds pamphlet is unknown. This song's events are described as occurring prior to the election of 1800. This couldn't be so, as Philip died in 1801.
Meet the latest graduate at King's College.
Except by this point in the timeline, both when the events actually occurred and in the show's fudged timeline, King's College had been renamed Columbia College.
Ladies, I'm looking for Mr. George Eaker.
Chernow says the two actually met purely by accident, and that they hardly knew each other.
I didn't say anything that wasn't true. Your father's a scoundrel, and so it seems to you.
The actual wording used was rascal, which at the time was provocative enough in itself to call for a duel.
Come back home when you're done. Take my guns.
They weren't his guns, they were John Barker Church's.
Look him in the eye, ain't no higher. Summon all the courage you require, and slowly and clearly aim your gun towards the sky.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
This is very much not what happened. What actually happened was that Philip straight up didn't raise his pistol at all, much to George's confusion. After a whole minute of waiting, they both raised their pistols, aiming very much at each other, whereupon George fired. Philip did discharge his pistol, but possibly by accident, as his finger spasmed post-shot.
He lost a lot of blood on the way over.
Yes, but you have to understand, the bullet entered just above his hip and lodged in his right arm.
This is a correct description, except the bullet lodged in his left arm, not his right.
I know you did everything just right. Even before we got to 10, I was aiming for the sky.
As described in the last song, no he wasn't. He didn't die as quickly as the musical seems to imply. Philip died the following morning. Once again, the events of this song took place in 1802, after the election of 1800.
And I pray that never used to happen before.
Technically, this isn't true. He was staunchly religious in his childhood in the West Indies.
The election of 1800.
Oh, there it is, about 3 songs and 2 years too late.
Poor Alexander Hamilton, he is missing in action. So now I'm facing Aaron Burr with his own faction.
The song seems to imply that Jefferson and Burr were actively running against each other. What was actually occurring here was that Jefferson and Burr were running mates. The system worked like so. Each member of the Electoral College had to vote twice. The individual with the most electoral votes would become president, with the runner-up becoming vice president, as explained earlier in the musical. Jefferson and Burr were running against John Adams and his running mate Charles Cotesworth Pinckney.
Talk less, smile more. Don't let them know what you're against or what you're for. Shake hands with him, charm her. It's 1800, ladies, tell your husbands, vote for Burr!
Except there was no popular vote at that time, so it wasn't the populace that decided the vote at all, it was all the Electoral College. Not to mention, Burr didn't even start to entertain the idea of becoming president at all until he became tied with Jefferson and the vote went to the representatives.
I don't like Adam.
Well, he's gonna lose. That's just a fetus.
The libretto for Hamilton describes this line as being sung by a female voter. This is anachronistic, as female suffrage wasn't a thing in the USA until about 1920.
Dear Mr. Hamilton, your fellow Federalists would like to know how you'll be voting.
Except Hamilton wouldn't be voting since he didn't have a seat in Congress or the Electoral College. Hamilton wasn't as indecisive as he's here depicted. He lobbied very heavily for Jefferson, even going as far as to throw heavy shade on Burr, describing him as, for instance, a bankrupt beyond redemption who loves nothing but himself, and insinuating he'd disturb our institutions to secure to himself permanent power.
Jefferson has my vote. I never agreed with Jefferson once.
Except on a few occasions he did. For instance, in a letter from 1790, George Washington said that he agreed with the position of Colonel Hamilton and Mr. Jefferson.
We have fought on like 75 different fronts. But when all is said and all is done, Jefferson has beliefs. Burr has none.
Again, he said a lot more than that. He called Jefferson a lover of liberty and desirous of something like orderly government, whereas before stated he threw much heavier shade at Burr than simply not having beliefs.
Well, I'll be damned. Well, I'll be damned.
Hamilton's on your side.
Well, I'll be damned.
And you won in a landslide.
It wasn't even Hamilton who decided this election at all. His influence did play a part in it, but it actually fell on the shoulders of one James Bayard to decide the election.
Our partnership.
As your vice president!
Yeah, right.
It is crazy that the guy who comes in second gets to be vice president.
Ooh, you know what? We can change that. You know why?
Why?
Because I'm the president.
Jefferson didn't immediately deny Burr the vice presidency. Burr actually did become his vice president, though with very little power, and Jefferson struck him off the card in the following election.
How does Hamilton, an arrogant, immigrant, orphan, bastard horse, somehow endorse Thomas Jefferson, his enemy? A man he's despised since the beginning, just to keep me from winning. Now you call me immoral, a dangerous disgrace.
If you've got something to say, name a time and place, face to face.
The song seems to imply that the election of 1800 is what spurred the Hamilton-Burr duel. It was actually a series of alleged statements that Hamilton had made at a dinner party, reported in the Albany Register by one Charles Cooper, 4 years after the election of 1800 to boot.
Even if I said what you think I said, you would need to cite a more specific grievance. Here's an itemized list of 30 years of disagreements.
Here's another one where I'm going to get very nitpicky. Hamilton did make a statement to a similar effect, but it referenced 15 years competition rather than 30. Oh, and even though it totally sounds like a thing the real Hamilton would have done, he didn't itemize a list of them either.
Burr, your grievance is legitimate. I stand by what I said. Every bit of it.
I'm labeling this as tentative, but I don't think Hamilton said anything like this in his letters. In correspondence with Burr, Hamilton maintained that he basically wouldn't confirm or deny anything short of a precise or definite opinion. Plus, in his initial statement on his desire to avoid the impending duel, he claims to be conscious of no ill will to Colonel Burr.
You stand only for yourself, it's what you do. I can't apologize because it's true.
Then stand, Alexander. We hawking. Dawn. Guns. Drawn.
You're on.
Again, in letters, he stated he wanted to avoid this duel. I'll label this one as tentative too, though, since it might have been bluster on his part.
I'll be back before you know I'm gone.
Come back to sleep.
This meeting's at 1.
Well, I'm going back to sleep.
Hey. Best of wives and best of women.
This exchange was actually a letter from Hamilton to Elizabeth, not a face-to-face interaction. Not to mention, the said letter was written a week before the duel actually occurred, which in turn means that the duel couldn't have taken place that very dawn, as Burr stated earlier.
Confession time, here's what I got. My fellow soldiers will tell you I'm a terrible shot.
This might be an understatement on Burr's part, since Ron Chernow calls him a superb marksman. And this understatement might also be something of an inaccuracy in itself, as Chernow goes on to quote contemporaries of his, stating that for 3 months past he had been in the constant habit of practicing with pistols, and that he'd been doing so for some time.
Raise a glass to freedom.
He aims his pistol at the sky!
Newsflash, he didn't. He actually aimed wide and hit a nearby tree. Incidentally, besides that detail, very little is known about the actual duel at all.
Wait! I struck him right between his ribs.
No, he didn't. The bullet entered through the right side of his abdomen.
Now I'm the villain in your history. I was too young and blind to see. I should have known the world was wide enough for both Hamilton and me.
Burr might not have been quite this regret-filled immediately after the duel. According to at least 2 sources, the first thing he did was go back to New York and have breakfast. And finally, I couldn't find any I could be pedantic enough to pick apart in Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story either, so I'll let that one slide. And that is all for this video. 4 years in the making, and finally it's done. Thank you everyone who turned up. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment if you liked it, leave a comment if you didn't like it, leave a comment if you think I've missed something. And also be sure to ding that little bell so you know when I've uploaded next, in the next 5 years, I guess. I'd also like to say an extra special thank you to all the friends I made whilst making this video, and everyone who turned up for all my work streams. You guys are the reason I keep doing this. Thank you so much. Until next time, ta-ta!